this going here. So a little bit of the breakdown of how we're going to navigate this today. We're going to start kind of at that 1,000-foot level. We're starting off with an aggregate. So whether or not you're a first-time CNC owner or veteran programmer and operator, we're going to kind of start at that level, introductory period. Walking down that further, why would I necessarily want an aggregate? How could I utilize that in my production process? Who is Benz? Why would we choose Benz over another competition out there? And then take another look at aggregates and then their applications. Really the most important, kind of the meat and potatoes of this presentation is really where we need to look at it specifically is where could you use this and what application in your process right now could Benz be a fit for you. Into Benz Solidfix, which is some of their proprietary adapter technology that is exclusive to Benz and very, very interesting. It's another one of those time-saving cost and cost-saving reduction mechanisms there as well. And then another look into the service and resources. So how do we support Benz here at Stiles in our partnership? Take a look at that and then follow up with a quick review and some questions and answers hopefully at the end there if anybody has anything left over. Oh, sorry about that. Skipped right through there. But without any further introduction, we'll jump into what's an aggregate. So 2001, why that was important here, Benz Inc. came to the U.S. for the first time. So we established Benz, essentially North America, Benz U.S. in 2001. So Benz is founded and centered and manufactures in Germany. In 2001, like I said, that was our U.S. extension. So when we came over to the U.S., part of that discussion was, well, let's reach out to our partners, our clients, and see what the feel is out there in the industry for aggregates themselves. So part of this, we pushed a survey out to whether it was operators, plant managers, even down to the purchasing teams as well. Who's aware of what an aggregate was? So that survey determined about 1 in every 5 people in the woodworking industry were familiar with aggregates. Not necessarily surprising, as you'll see in a couple slides coming up, woodworking aggregates really came into prominence in the 90s. So with about a 10-year buffer there, 1 out of 5 was not necessarily surprising. Plus the terminology, let's be honest, can be a little confusing. I think of aggregates, I think of construction, I think of rocks. A little different here, obviously. So in 2018, did a follow-up study. Same group of people in that woodworking industry again. We determined at this point there were about 3 in every 5. So a couple different ways to look at that. I kind of tend to look at that and say 3 out of 5. Boy, I wish it was 5 out of 5. But you take a step back and you look at exactly what that means for the industry. One is CNC technologies continue to increase. Right around 2001, our CNC machines were aggregate usage was tended to be limited more towards the industrial heavy end processing machines, so larger scale CNCs. As that technology has shifted, we've seen more and more, we've been able to implement aggregates on quote unquote an entry level CNC machine, if you will. So room for growth there, obviously, and that's one thing that we work on continuously, but very exciting growth. And I think that indicates a little bit of the shift in the woodworking industry towards greater technology and, again, streamlining our process. So what is an aggregate technically? An aggregate is a device, you can see it in the background photo here. It's attached to the end of your spindle motor on a CNC machine that allows the operator to drill, mill, saw, plane, brush, sand, polish, cut, chisel, etc. Could really wrap that up into just about anything. I mean, it really is a tool that maximizes the capabilities of your CNC machine, can really help take you to the next level, rather than just essentially inserting a tool into the tool holder and end of your CNC. You really change the capability and functionality of your machine. And we'll jump into each one of those. I know that's a lot to digest there right at once, but we'll hit each of those points as we go along. So what does this actually look like on my machine? This is a question we get very frequently when you go to trade shows and things like that. They see an aggregate sitting on the table and say, well, one, can that fit on my machine, and how would that fit on my machine? So this is something we put together. I think it's somewhat interesting to see. Again, if you're kind of at that introductory level, no issues with that. It's a question we get, like I said, very consistently. So in your CNC, you have your spindle motor, kind of the heart and soul of our CNC equipment. And how that fits would be an aggregate retention ring or C-axis. So this highlighted portion that we see here, this would actually be a C-axis, which again allows us to rotate in that C-axis. But that would slip over the nose of your spindle motor. So as you can see there, that essentially would marry up with our spindle motor at that point. Or if you're looking at kind of the inner dimension there inside of that C-axis, you can see kind of the black ring portion there. That would be considered our aggregate retention ring. So an important fact or note to make is often the misconception is if I don't have C-axis, I can't use aggregates on my machine. There are actually, you can use just about any aggregate that we have without a C-axis. Now, does a C-axis give you additional capabilities? Absolutely. Absolutely. But you have many, many capabilities and opportunities even without a C-axis. So it's always a great point we like to point out. So furthermore, components on the aggregate, we have a torque arm. So essentially what these are going to be is anti-rotational pins that would fit up into that aggregate retention ring or coupled with the C-axis as you see there. Essentially stop the rotation so we don't have the entire aggregate body just spinning wildly. So it forces just the rotation to be through that machine connection. So that's actually how we power the aggregate without it essentially spinning out of control on us there. And then down to the aggregate body itself. And we'll take another look, a little bit deeper look, obviously, at that aggregate body here. So a couple different terms that you'll see as we go along, or things to kind of keep in the back of your mind as you're doing some research. You're going to have your taper, your cone, also could be known as your machine connection, so like an HSK 63F there. Also, another fact to keep in mind, if you don't have an HSK 63F, it doesn't take you out of the running for an aggregate by any means. We have full machine connections that we can work with, ISO 30 to, goodness, just about anything under the sun that you could think of, we can work with. Support pins there, going down, again, this would be what the support pins and anti-rotation pins, or what would insert into the aggregate retention ring that would keep us stable and keep the body from rotating unnecessarily. Down to the torque arm. The torque arm is a modular system, and this is really what makes Benz quite so interesting and quite diverse in its integration capabilities. So what we would do in this case, if you had, for example, a home ag or a Como machine, is these are modular systems, so we remove that torque arm and we'd install your machine manufacturer's specific torque arm so that we're able to integrate with that machine. Great units, and likewise, you know, kind of coupled with that question, we often get, well, could I get a different torque arm and run this on a different machine? Absolutely. As long as we can make sure that machine connection or your taper cone is the same across those two machine manufacturers, you're good to go. We'd swap out a torque arm. We can change that from there. Also with the torque arm, a very interesting aspect of this, there are a couple bolts you can kind of see along the bottom there. Removing those bolts allows you to rotate that torque arm and rotate the aggregate itself. So that's when we come back to, if I don't have a C-axis, can I use an aggregate? Absolutely. This is one example of how you could rotate this without necessarily having to take this out of the machine. Down to the aggregate body itself. And then most importantly are your tool outputs. So the aggregate we're looking at is actually, it's a duo is what we term that, a dual output aggregate. And this would be a right side, so we'd be at machining always at a 90 here. But you can see on this example, we have two separate outputs, kind of the beauty of the duo unit. So on one side, we have what looks like to be an ER32, while on the other, we have a saw blade connection. So those are interchangeable. We can customize those really on every aggregate. So what we do is walk through that process with you and determine what you'd be looking at there, and we'd spec that out for you. So we have a full list of tool outputs that are available to use in that regard. So just a quick rundown on the aggregate terminology and breakdown for you there. Furthermore, some of the terms that you'll see as we go and that you'll get familiar with if you work with Benz is the classic line and the premium line. What these are essentially our lubrication lines, or you could call them essentially a standard duty to a heavier duty. So our classic line, which is the majority of the aggregates that we have out in the field, would be a grease lubrication. And we have standard aggregates in that for nearly every application. Premium line, which we would jump over, would be designed for a somewhat heavier duty. I always struggle with the heavier duty terminology because that, in my mind, somehow indicates that the classic line isn't quite as heavy duty. It's really not the case. What this is a change to oil bath lubrication, and where we see that jump is technically when we hit, rule of thumb is we look for 50% run time during a shift. So what we mean by that, if you're running an 8-hour shift, that we would expect this aggregate to be running necessarily full speed for about 4 or more hours. In those instances, when it's running that 50% production, that's when we tend to shift towards an oil bath. Once again, all the gears are going to sit in a continuous oil bath lubrication there. So it helps extend the life of the aggregate, but also keep the temperature down. So those are the two lines that we'll see referenced here quite a bit. So brief introduction on what is an aggregate. Important question is, well, why on earth would I want one? This is a picture we always like to show. I'm assuming that this is staged. I sure hope it is. But it's kind of a telling picture. You know, it's easy to point at this one and laugh a little bit, but the more you kind of take a deeper look at this, it rings true for me, I know, and I'm sure for a number of the partners that I discuss with as well. Kind of an example of, you know, we all get busy. We take on so many jobs, and we're working with the equipment that we've got in the shop, and we're constantly trying to essentially make the most out of the equipment that we have. And if you're anything like me, I tend to take on a little bit more than I can handle maybe sometimes. And just tackling that with the equipment and whatever I have at my disposal. And in the back of my head, I'm saying, okay, I'm going to do it this time this way, but I know I need to change it. So the next time around, I'm going to change up my process. Well, again, the next time for me tends to be sometimes 3, 4, 5 times down the road because you get so busy. And again, we're trying to do everything we can for our customers and try and keep in front of everything. So just kind of a subtle reminder, there's different ways to tackle these jobs, and sometimes it takes a little bit of a break and a step back to see those things. So this is, I wanted to start off with a little bit of kind of the internal, show you a little bit of how we approach our partners, for example. So how do we begin the process of looking at adding aggregate to a CNC machine? So we've got kind of streamlined here, maximizing your CNC equipment capabilities. What we mean by that is, for example, if you're a first-time CNC owner, those first couple years when you have that machine in your facility and you're working through it, you're taking on new jobs or maybe completing what you were, really bought that machine specifically for, you learn a lot about that. Your operators are going to learn, your programmers are going to learn, and you really start to approach kind of a mastery level with that CNC machine. So within those first 2 years, you really kind of get your feet underneath you. When we start entering that 2 to 3 year, depending on the facility again, we start to enter that time frame. We get closer to that mastery level, and we start to learn, again, I bought this CNC for this exact purpose. It's performed flawlessly for me, but as I've expanded my capabilities, my customers are requiring a little bit more from me, or I want to try some new things. Or maybe I didn't exactly spec this machine out to take me further down the road in this exact regard. So that's kind of where we will start working with our partners again, that 2 to 3 year age range on their CNC equipment. We'll start talking to them, one, how's the machine been running for you? Is it functioning and doing everything that you ask it to? And are there some things that we could look at adding to it, whether it be through an aggregate or through tooling capacities? And then again, we keep walking on and on. That 3 to 4 year timeline, we're really starting to look at reducing our cost and our setup times, and obviously looking to minimize errors as much as we can. Obviously, we're going to look at minimizing errors every time, but that tends to really start to come into focus kind of as the timeline increases. And along with that, we're going to look to improve our productivity and obviously our process flow as well. So a little bit of an internal look on how we work with our partners there. So along with that, brief introduction on who is Benz. Why would we choose Benz? There are a number of competitors out there that you're going to see. What really cements Benz in the woodworking industry, and as well as manufacturing industry overall, is their longevity and their commitment to excellence and quality. Founded on literally, these are the 3 words that they still use every day at Benz: innovation, precision, and passion. And that's everyone that we work with at Benz. We hope exudes that same kind of confidence and those same kind of values. So you can see here, founded in 1946. In the 1980s, the first CNC aggregate heads were produced. Now those were in the metal industry. And then in the 90s, we saw the woodworking aggregates really start to take hold after that point. 2000 to 2001, we talked about a little bit earlier, Benz Inc. established in the USA. That's what we were part of here. 2009, HOMAG acquired Benz Inc. And then 2019, Benz and Stiles, we merged together. So it's been a great partnership there. And again, it's just a commitment to excellence. And really what we've been doing is trying to leverage, as we see, somewhat the iron sharpens iron between Stiles and Benz, and that great commitment there. So now jumping in a little bit further, aggregates and applications, really where the majority of the presentation is going to lie. This is really the most important part. You know, we can look at these aggregates and how to actually apply them into the process and into my workflow. So what we'll go through, and what I've gauged this off of is spending a lot of time on the phone with partners, a lot of times with our internal personnel as well, and fielding the questions, you know, can an aggregate do this? Can Benz do this? Well, absolutely. And so that's kind of what we've geared this after, is we're going to walk through each of these steps and show you how Benz can be an asset for you as well. So starting off with drilling, I love this picture. This is a pretty impressive drill block here. You can see we've got the saw, whether you want to kerf with that. A lot of applications, from simple dowel drill holes to rows of holes and acoustic panels. My goodness, drilling is really honestly one of the largest application areas for Benz. Along with that, this is obviously a monster of a drill block, not necessarily going to be a fit for everybody who understand that. But one of the aggregate offerings that we offer would be a multi-V unit, we call it. So there's a vertical and a horizontal drilling units, and those can come in either a 3 spindle, 5, 7, 9, 11, all the way up to 144, believe it or not. So we've done a number of 144 spindle units before. Those are quite massive. If you're interested in one of those, please get with me offline. A little bit of legwork to do on that, but it's out there. And again, one of the largest application areas for Benz, but alongside that, one of the most customizable units that we have as well. From the amount of spindles that you need, if, for example, a 3 to 5 to 7 doesn't fit for you, we can obviously change that up, but then also to your drill pattern. We do a very, very large number of customized units here, and we get you in touch right with our engineering team, and we walk through that process with you step by step, from taking a look at the materials and the finished products that you'd like to achieve, and then how we can implement a Benz drill head into that aspect. Getting into milling now. So milling, another large application area for Benz. Milling processes are one of the primary applications, honestly, for CNC machines. So you can see this is a great photo here of our Forte head, is what that's called. This is doing a lock recess. As you can see here, we actually have a little bit of offset on this unit, so you can load that up with a little bit longer tool, so you can plunge into the material a little bit longer, or sorry, at a greater depth. Lot of different applications here. The Forte unit is a great one. You can see here it's got a dual output. So coming off the back there, it's an ER16A tool output on there as well. One other thing to pay attention, you know, we walked through the steps on the aggregates. You can see here's your aggregate tension ring, the torque arm to the body. One unique aspect that this aggregate has, and we're starting to see these more and more as time goes on, is kind of that copper brass looking piping there coming down right near the tool output. So we have a number of manufacturers that now have the capability to transfer air through the spindle down to the aggregate itself. So what that unit is right there is actually an air blow-off device. So a great tool is, if you're making some of these deep cuts, you know, on these lock recesses, you understand very well that some of the chips and things like that accumulate can slow you down, reduce the tool life, dull your blades, etc. So this is a great way to kind of minimize those effects. So as you're machining, you're able to blow some of these chips directly onto your tool. So it's a great asset to have as well. And again, if you have any questions on that with some of your machine manufacturers, feel free to let us know, and we can work with you on that as well. Sawing. Very, very, again, I say large application area in all of these, but honestly, large number of sawing applications here as well. So the unit you see here is a Flex D. We'll dive into that one here in just a little bit. But you can cut precise, lengthwise, cross, miter cuts, sections, grooves, kerf cutting, bead boards, really just about anything. Powerful separation here. different size blade and different angles on different units are available. That's a little wordy, and what that really means is we have certain aggregates set up for certain blade types. If you're wanting to use a larger blade like the aggregate here, for example, this Flex D Premium is a great fit for it versus a Forte unit, for example. You wouldn't be able to necessarily, even with an arbor, wouldn't be able to put a very large saw blade on there, for example. And again, we'll dive into this Flex D aggregate here in depth in just a little bit. Planing. So this is an example of the molder head. We actually broke the molder head out into two separate application areas between planing and brushing, which we'll see in just a second. Products can obviously be planed in one clamping process using the molder head. So a very, very versatile unit. This is actually the smallest of the molder units that we have. So there's a 30 mil diameter arbor there that you can see. We also have a 35 that allows you to stack blades, whatever kind of heads you would like on there. We can work with the brushes as well, and even in a randomizer. So great application for, or great unit for V-grooving application, miter folding, bead boards, kerf cutting. You can throw saw blades on here as well. Very, very robust, very heavy duty unit. Anytime you're getting into, some heavy V-grooving and things like that, this is a unit that we generally will look at versus a mono or a single arbor situation. Would tend to use a molder unit at this point. Jumping over again, now you're looking into brushing. Great photo here. You can see this would be, again, this is the molder unit. This is probably the 120, just from looking at this. But this is the result of a simple tool change, and now you've got a brushing aggregate head. You can see here they've got a wire brush. Excuse me. Leaves that great finish on the material. Going over there again. This is shown on a pot and rail single clamp system here. But again, diverse effects and refurbishing outcomes using different brushes. We have seen a huge uptick in brushing applications, a lot with kind of that rustic, or I call it kind of a barnwood finish. We even get a number of customers that work with, their local tool supplier. You give a bar blank and they actually will create randomizers. Some of those are extremely unique looking, I guess, which is fitting with the name randomizer, but leaves some very, very interesting and very unique finishes on the board. So that kind of distressed, somewhat beat up, weathered look. Great application, or a great unit for that kind of application there. Sanding. Sanding is another large one. It's again, I think in the last five years, we've turned more sanding heads than we had in the previous almost 10. It's been a huge change within the woodworking industry. Obviously, we have, the belt sanders, large scale as well. But for those partners that are wanting to necessarily use their CNC kind of as a one-stop shop and want to hit the edges, or even we've got orbital applications and units as well, it's a great fit for that. So this would be the Clevo, excuse me, which would be our belt sanding unit. And again, perfect patterns for customized feeling. These all have a little bit of float and play to them as well, to accommodate whatever board material or application you'd really be looking at there. And again, another part, we don't have it pictured here, but we do also have orbital. We've got a circular orbit, and then we also have a rectangular orbital head as well. So for some of those 5-piece, 5-panel doors getting into the corners, it's a great solution for that as well. Into cutting applications. So this is our SECO unit. This is one I would say probably we get more questions on than any other aggregate at our trade shows. It's unique looking, and it's very diverse in its capabilities. So what you see here, it looks like it's cutting some carpet, and you can see it's a little bit smaller, but kind of under the center, right underneath that bell, as you can see the knife unit itself. So this is a reciprocating knife aggregate, and the bell portion is actually a floating tracing shoe. It's got about 8 millimeters of float there. And again, this is a wide range of applications, from cutting fabrics to cutting foams to cutting rubber, cardboard, my goodness, you name it, gator board, those linoleum materials, and a lot of composites. We get a little bit of everything. We really, really enjoy working with our partners on the SECO aggregate. One, because we love to hear what people are producing and cutting with it. We learn a little bit, almost, I feel like every week on this unit, somebody calls in and said, man, I cut this with this. You got to be kidding me. Well, that's great. And again, we have an exclusive partnership on that reciprocating knife that we can supply as well. So it's actually made exclusively for our Benz SECO aggregate. So great partnership there. And like I said, we'll take a look at some videos here coming up, but very, very robust aggregate for you there. So now let's jump in a little bit too. We're going to have some videos that roll in the background. It's easy enough to talk about the aggregates, but until you really see them in action, it's a hard thing to necessarily cement in. So the first one, excuse me, that we're going to jump into would be our MONOR. So this is going to be a single-sided angle head, and this would be available in both a classic and premium line. So again, that's the grease lubricated, which would be the classic, and the premium, which would be oil bath. And very, very versatile unit here. You can see the applications between sawing, milling, drilling, planing, brushing, a little bit of everything. And how we achieve that, again, is we would change that tool output. So the unit that you're seeing in the video and in the picture below, that's equipped with a saw blade output, obviously. You can change that out if you would like. You can actually throw an arbor on there, up to a 60 millimeter arbor on this unit itself, so you could stack blades. So if you wanted to get into some of those things like a curve cut or processing some beadboard, good application for you there. This video, and I don't know if I can actually get down to, this is one of my favorite Benz videos, and this is I guess disclaimer before we show this video is this is a experienced programmer running this material. He's actually going to cut a board with this mono aggregate, and he's got a monster saw blade on there. But as he goes through this process, and we'll skip ahead, it's actually fairly impressive. But you can see he's actually going to machine out a bowl. So again, this is one of the best parts of honestly working with Benz is, we get to learn right alongside our partners and see what exactly they're machining. And I mean, you guys are truly the experts on these, working on these machines in and out, or daily in and out. And we learn a tremendous amount from our partner base, and this is a great example of it. Very unique. Oh, sorry about that. Jumped ahead here. So now we're going to get into the adjustable angle head. So this is a Flex D unit. So the one that you're going to see in the video and in the photo is part of the premium line. Keep in mind, again, there's a classic and premium. But those adjustable angle heads here these are extremely versatile units. So you can see here any angle between -15 up to 102 on that A axis. And what the video is going to illustrate is just how easy it is to adjust your aggregate. So you're going to loosen up that set screw, and then you're going to go here to your adjustment screw, and they're going to start adjusting. A little difficult to see in there, but you can actually see the digital readout will give you your precise angle. This is a far cry from where we were at with the previous adjustable angle heads. We used a vernier scale, so you're actually looking pretty intently. We have a large number of those out there. They're great units as well. This is just a much easier readout for you. You can see they're adjusting quickly on the fly. And again, these are extremely versatile units between sawing, milling, drilling. We'll let that video replay as we talk. One of the most interesting aspects with the Flex D, especially on the classic line, is the output. So we actually have what's called a combi output, a combination output. So on that unit, you have the ability to attach a saw blade or use an ER25. So very versatile unit again, so I can change out my tooling just like that, rather than being necessarily married to a specific tool output like an arbor or an SD saw connection. This is honestly, if kind of your first brush with aggregates, this is one that we talked to quite a few partners about. Tends to be their first step into the aggregate processing world. One, just because of that versatility of the unit. You've got the adjustability, and then you have the versatility with the tool outputs as well. So very, very robust, very versatile units. Great asset is Flex D. Moving along here, we've got the floating V. Excuse me, floating V meaning floating vertical. So what's going on here with these machines, so that's a very quick video, is these were brought about really for thickness tolerances and uneven surface issues. We're based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, so here in the Midwest, I'm not sure where you're at, but we have quite a bit of humidity, and our weather tends to change on a dime, which is good and bad, but in the woodworking industry, it's not great if I have a large amount of material sitting in my storage area waiting to be processed. So it causes dimensional instability in my materials. I can see waviness, and again, those uneven surface issues. That's really where the floating aggregates were born and bred, is to really tackle those situations. So if I do have any unevenness, but my project and my material still almost always will require that continuous depth of cut. That's where the floating unit really makes its money there. You have 8 mil of float available on those floating aggregates. What you would do is you'd program that down, essentially 4 mil, so you engage somewhat, we call it that float zone. So at that point, I'll ride along the edge of my material. And again, accounting for any kind of disturbances or unevenness in that board, I can essentially float right over that and ensure that I've always have that same depth of cut. Great application for this is one of our great partners is Lockdown. It's a joinery system. They work almost exclusively with the Benz floating aggregate, just because of that precision needed for their connection system. So great opportunity there. Standard configuration tool output, I wanted to call that out on the floating unit. It's called our Solidfix S3, and we'll dive into that again, but that's one of those quick change modular systems and adapters that's really focused on driving down your setup costs and time. So we'll jump into that one even further here. Over to the cutting unit, the SECO unit that we talked about. Great video here, and it's going to roll through a number of these different applications as it goes. Right now you can see it cutting foam. This comes in only, this is our classic line, so a grease lubricated unit. Majority is going to be on the application side, cutting your non-wood materials like a carpet, foam, like you see here, plastic, veneer, leather, etc. Like I said, this is a very fun unit to work with because, like I said, we learn weekly. We've got a number of customers who will call us in and call into us and let us know, man, I just cut this and this and this, and it's pretty impressive. Wide range of opportunities there. We've had a number of our partners who actually will call in on a nested base machine, for example. Say you're cutting out parts, let's say for a chair, for example. Monday through Wednesday, I would gear my CNC to cut components to make that chair, and then possibly Thursday and Friday, I'd change over to my SECO, my cutting aggregate, and now I can run my fabrics and I can run my foams. So essentially I've turned my nested base machine into a chair production machine. I can do that all on one machine. It's just a great example of really what we're striving for at Benz, is to really maximize your capabilities in your equipment. So we'll let it roll through here a couple. This is on veneer as well. A lot of different applications there. And we'll kind of close out our quick run through on some of the aggregates with the Flex 5 unit. Flex 5 is one of, I would say, probably the most name recognizable unit that we have. Made a lot of noise with this one earlier, around 2010 is really when this started coming into prominence. As you can see through the video, and the video really speaks for itself, we're going to get a lot of the same aspects and applications out of this unit that we would with the Flex D that we took a look at. Main difference here is that I'm going to be able to adjust my angle automatically on the fly. So how we do that is through an airlock system. At the beginning of the video, you would see that it would come down, it would release that airlock, and then through a equation, where essentially our rotation on that C-axis is going to amount to a certain degree. So the machine is going to adjust our C-axis and thus adjusting our angle simultaneously. Very, very versatile unit. And the one that we actually see here in the video would be the Flex 5 Plus unit. So there's a Flex 5 and a Flex 5 Plus. And if you ever run across that, the main difference between those two units is the Plus gives you the ability to do an automatic tool change, which it's going to do right here for you on this video. Again, utilizing that same airlock system, it's going to come down and it's going to grab a new tool. We've got that new tool loaded up. We're going to come down, airlock, and we're going to adjust our angle. And at this point, we're ready to go. This is a great unit for, if you're familiar with the Lamello Clam XP joinery systems. This is a unit that's used almost nearly exclusively for that on the HOMAG side of things. This was HOMAG exclusive material for a number of years. In the last, oh goodness, probably 3 or 4 years, we've seen that change a little bit as well. So we've been able to work with other machine manufacturers out there. So Onsrud, Felder, for example, just being a few of them. Any questions on that unit, again, feel free to give me or shoot me an email, and we can discuss that at length and see what your machine capabilities might be. Like I said, extremely versatile unit. And that automatic adjustment of the angle, which you can see executing here along with that tool adjust, really sets this one apart. So after walking through those aggregates and applications, we talked about Benz Solidfix a couple times on the floating units, for example. Want to take a look at the Solidfix, which again is a Benz exclusive technology. So as we've kind of seen as we've walked through Benz, what we're really geared and what we're really attempting to do is maximize your machining capabilities while minimizing your investment. Really look at doing that. And part of that is your setup times and the costs that are associated with that. You know, anytime that machine's not running, we understand that costs dollars. So this is where Solidfix was really born. We listened to the customers for a very, a long time and asked, what exactly do you need on your setup time? What can we do to help reduce that? This was the #1 answer far and away, is tool changes. So I've got an aggregate, which is great, but I want to change out to a different bit or a different saw blade. Here, and here. And so I've got to pull the aggregate. I've got to change that out. I've got to do my measurements. And there's inherent time that comes along with that. So the Solidfix system is a quick manual tool change for higher accuracy. What we mean by that is you're going to have separate adapters set up with your specific tool that you can have pre-measured and set up in your tool manager, whichever tool manager database you're working with. High variability and flexibility with a wide range of tool adapters. We'll see those in a second, from saw blade connections to drill bits, collets, you name it. Even into bar blanks that we can use there, which we can actually use, and you can send to your tooling supplier and they can manufacture or fabricate whichever tool you're looking for specifically there. Again, minimizing the setup times, low investment. And where we see that low investment is versus buying a whole nother aggregate. You could look at a Solidfix unit and really make that unit that much more adjustable and versatile. I mean, you could essentially negate the need to purchase another aggregate entirely. Low investment wise, we look at the adapters. You're ranging anywhere from about $400 to $800 on those adapters as well. So relatively low overhead cost on there. And then jumping over, you can see the savings, that setup time on the side, and exchanging units. So what we mean by that is actually going back to your tool changer, picking up a different aggregate and moving along that way. Tool change would be an additional savings. So necessarily, I might not necessarily need to change out an aggregate entirely, but I want to change the tool on that aggregate. Reduces some of your time, but obviously you still have setup time involved. And that's where the Solidfix comes in. It's going to further reduce those setup times down to this quick change system, which we'll see just a second here. So a great video, which is going to give you an example. This is back to that Duo unit here. So you've got an ER32 there. They're going to quickly loosen this screw. There's no specific or special tools needed for this. You can see this is an Allen wrench. You're going to remove the adapter, quarter turn on the adapter. And there you go. And then at this point now, they're going to change up. They're going to bring up a new adapter. You can see the Solidfix is a female unit there. And then we have a number of adapters. You can see here he's going to change this to the bit. And on the side here, you can see we have our saw blade application shown. Again, a wide variety of units there. Where this is great is, again, if you have separate tools that you'd like to run, you can have those presets. You can have them pre-measured. It's just going to help reduce your setup time even further. Great application. This can be used, our Solidfix, on a number of our aggregates. We're working on the engineering side to change even more so, but nearly all of our Benz aggregates now are Solidfix capable as well. So there's a little bit of an additional cost at the time of purchase, but then, like we said, you get that extra added versatility with changing out the adapters as you go. And another aspect of this is just something to think about if you haven't before. Like a lot of other things that we purchase for our production process, we buy them for an exact specific need or maybe even a specific job. So we understand that those needs change over time. So while my mono aggregate might have worked great for jobs X, Y, and Z, well, now that A has come along, I might need to change my tool output. This is really where the Solidfix shines. It allows you to have that flexibility at a very low price point. A lot of additional information available on that. If there's any questions, feel free to always reach out to me. We can walk you through that process and even show you some applications that some of our partners have shared with us. Some great stuff there. So now jumping in a little bit into the service and resources. We touched on earlier the merger between Stiles and Benz in 2019, then further down the road with HomeAg. So what does that really mean for Benz, and more importantly for you? What are the services available behind that Benz brand? So we have our Stiles E-Tech and Rebuild Center solution. So based out of Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I'm at today, we have our repair and express service. So we have a full rebuild center here in-house. We service every aggregate, every Benz aggregate that's out there, and we even service some competitor aggregates, honestly. Along with that, we have exchange programs. We also understand as you tend to process and the aggregates become an integral part of your production process, you can't necessarily be without them. We understand that. So that's where the exchange programs come into play. Even if you're looking at a PM visit, for example, I'm nearing my annual hours on my aggregate. I want to prepare. You can reach out to us, to myself or Lawrence Millward, and say, you know what, I'm coming up close to my PM hours. Do you have anything in exchange? I don't want to be down. And we can coordinate with you and actually get you an aggregate on site. So you can actually install that exchange unit at the time that you're pulling yours off for the PM or rebuild service. Our main goal is to minimize your downtime. We don't want any kind of downtime if we can avoid it for you. Preventive maintenance, which we touched on there, very important. Every aggregate comes out with its own PM report. And then coupled along with that, we have our 24/7 spare parts service. That is a true 24/7 spare parts, as well as our tech support. When you call into our 24/7 line, you will talk to a Stiles representative. You're not going to talk to a machine. We are always there, always available, always have inventory for you. So installation and integration, we have our full Stiles FSR, our field service representatives in every region in the U.S., also into Canada and into Mexico as well. We have teams there to help out with whatever you may need. These guys are extremely well-versed in the CNC world as well as Benz aggregates and can help on the integration and process side for you as well. Coupled with our 24/7 tech support, very similar to our spare parts service. When you call in, you will talk to a Stiles representative. Extremely knowledgeable. And if needed, we have the hotlines and direct lines back to Germany if needed as well. So focusing a little bit specifically on the rebuild center side of this, on our E-Tech side, we have a full service and rebuild capabilities like we talked about in Grand Rapids here in Michigan with factory trained technicians. We have same-day exchanges available for multiple aggregate types, nearly all. That's what we talked about. If you're getting ready for that PM or you're sending in a rebuild, let us know. If you want to avoid any of that downtime, we can have an exchange unit there for you to keep you up and running. Components are meticulously inspected. All worn parts are replaced. Everything that we do here in our rebuild center comes out with a same as new warranty using all OEM equipment. That is one of, when we say factory trained technicians, we don't take that lightly. These guys spend months and months and months in Germany with the factory technicians learning the ins and outs so that we have the ability to roll this out of our rebuild center here with that same as new warranty. And we will honor that 100%. Some other additional information for you as well. Part of that Stiles and Benz merger. In 2019, we tripled our available inventory. That was another thing. When we kind of came on board, we polled our existing partners and customers and said, what are some things that we can do better for you? And number one there was lead times. And we understand that, by the time really in your process, when you get to the point where you're looking to buy and pull the trigger on an aggregate, you need it now. You don't need it in 8 weeks. You need it now. And that's really the focus here. It is a little bit tricky because we talked about some of the customization options available, but we've worked with a number of different inventory solution specialists as well to make sure that we have the best available aggregates and builds available in-house. I've talked about the modular designs allowing for integration on a variety of CNC equipment. So no matter your machine manufacturer, let us know. We more than likely are working with them already, or if we haven't, we can work with them going forward in the future. Again, that's akin back to the modular design, the machine connections, the torque arms, and then your tool outputs as well. Live demonstrations available during the COVID-19 pandemic. Wanted to make sure we called that out. If you haven't seen some of our Stiles resources that are out there, we've got some great videos and live demos that are available. We have Derek Hart, who manages our Stiles showrooms, always available. If you want to see a certain aggregate machining on certain material, let us know and we can get something set up where you and your team can actually dial in and work with Derek one-on-one and take a look at these aggregates and see how they process. Along with that, Stiles University, which is putting our solutions live webinar right now. We have some tremendous resources and assets there for you as well as training opportunities. Any questions there, feel free to touch base with Ian. Like I said, just tremendous training opportunities for you there.